leave this later with you all that they sent me, if that's fine.
Thank you.
Chairman, will I be able to put that in form of a motion tomorrow? At full commission?
You can take that up tomorrow, yes.
But I can do it then?
Yes.
You don't have to come through? Okay, all right, thank you.
Director Carter?
I think just for clarification, I'll ask that the raccoon comments are appropriate now, and the fact that I don't think you've taken up 1707, which is the fur bearer proclamation. Is that correct? Or have
We did.
we already did it? Must have been while I was really busy. Sorry.
Yeah. They asked me to do it in that order, so that's what we did. So, where were we? Now, we'd like to call Joy Sweeney for Proclamation 1706.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just got about 3 more slides. And what this proclamation covers is our national refuges. Nope. Edit. So the National Wildlife Refuges are run by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they use our proclamation passing process to institute regulations that we can uphold. They work on their federal areas, and then they pass along their recommendations to us. And we help them by allowing them and pushing these recommendations through this process. We, at this point in time, don't collaborate on these recommendations. So this is why there's not a whole lot of explanations that go into these recommendations. There's several refuges, and they're all in West Tennessee. And the ones that we're going to talk about today are in the north part of the state. Reelfoot and Lake Isom are usually grouped together in Cross Creeks. On the Tennessee, oh, I probably missed that one too. The Tennessee, that's over in the east part of West Tennessee, Tennessee Wildlife Refuge. On this refuge, we recommend removing the bonus status from deer taken on the young sportsman deer hunt. And I know last commission meeting this struck people, negatively, and I did get clarification on this. And the reason is because this hunt is also on the same weekend as the statewide youth sportsman deer hunt. On Reelfoot and Lake Isom National Wildlife Refuges, the recommendation is to change bag limits for raccoon hunts from same as statewide to no limit. And on Reelfoot, the recommendation is to have 2 deer gun quota hunts with 125 permits each. Currently, there is 1 hunt with 150 permits. And that concludes the recommendations for those.
Thank you, Joy. Are there any discussion from the committee? Any discussion from the public?
Would you please clarify, just because that youth hunt is on the same as a statewide, what difference does that make? Why would it not still qualify as a bonus deer?
I believe it makes a difference, and maybe if someone wants to volunteer to clarify my explanation, because
I'm looking right at you.
all right, there we go.
I'm Jim Hamilton, Wildlife Program Manager in Region 1. On Tennessee National, they have 2 young sportsman's hunts. The first one is Joy, I think it's September, first part of September, or end of September, first part of October, right in there. And that's outside of the statewide season bag limits. That is a bonus deer. That youth hunt is a bonus deer. The second hunt, youth hunt, is the same as statewide season hunt, October 29th and 30th, or whatever dates they are. And that's not a bonus deer. So they have one that's a bonus deer and one that's not. The one that's statewide goes along with the statewide season bag limits, and it's not a bonus deer. Clear? That's what the refuge did. We don't control, it's their recommendation. We honor what they say. And they've already set their brochures have already gone to the printer. That's it? Good?
Well, to finish talking about it, let's vote. So proclamation 1706, hunting seasons and bag limits on select national wildlife refuges and other federal areas. All in favor of the committee, say aye. Any opposed? No. Proclamation 1706 passes. And now I'd like to recognize Colonel Darren Ryder to discuss proclamation 1704.
Thank you, Commissioner Cook. This is Proclamation 1704, which is manner and means of hunting, taking, and trapping. Our very first item of business is going to deal with something that needs clarification and understanding. Duck season is over. It ended last night, 6-3.
Great.
Just,
Yeah. That's great.
Now to business. Underneath Section 3, which is legal trapping devices and definitions, there was a new public chapter passed, and its effective date is July 1 of 2017. It does a couple things. For one, it deletes the definition for cush hold traps, but more importantly, there's 3 items that it amends to allow the commission to adopt rules and regulations on traps, and that's types of steel traps, placement of steel traps, and then inspection of steel traps. So what we're recommending for Section 3 under subsection 1, we want to strike that first sentence. And the reason why we want to strike that is due to the new public chapter change. Then the amendment to subsection 5 underneath this section, it defines our traps. It's laminated jaw traps, it's cushion hold traps, it's offset wide jaw traps, it's offset laminated jaw traps, and it's wide jaw traps. So this is one of the 3 things that it allows, is to determine the types of traps that can be used. And then what we need to do is add a new subsection 8, which would be a second phase of the new law, and that determines placement of the traps, both the above grounds and water sets. And it also describes how to place those 5 new traps that we were able to determine the type on. And lastly, underneath this, we need to add a subsection 9 to define the inspection. So that covers all 3 things that this new public chapter, when it becomes effective July, it'll cover all 3 things that it allows y'all to adopt if y'all so to elect. Now, Colonel Taylor presented this piece last time. This is going to be underneath Section 4, which is big game checking. And what all this does right here, it's a technical cleanup to clarify that all big game animals must be checked in, and not just the ones that are being gifted to one another or that are leaving the state. So those are some recommended changes for manner and means 1704.
Thank you, Darren. With the game check-in in mind, where are we from the agency perspective on, we've had discussions on various options for game, checking in game. Do we have any progress on that?
Boy, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
So we've discussed various ways to check in game, to have a written record, something other than just the.
You're talking about, are you trying to go back to the tagging piece?
Yeah.
We left that alone a while back.
Okay.
But now if you bring it up, you're bringing it up.
I am bringing it up.
Yeah, we got 3 ways to check deer in. That's what this proclamation does. But as far as the tagging piece that we discussed 4 or 5 months ago, no, there's been nothing on that.
Okay, any discussion from the committee?
Well, are we going to continue to discuss this, or?
Yes.
I guess I'd like to know why we haven't made some progress on this. This seemed to be pretty important to sportsmen and the agency and the commission and everybody else. So if, you know, I don't know whether we don't know what to do, but, you know, there are options for harvest cards and for shortening the time to check in, and, you know, I'd like to kind of have a discussion about it, because I think a decision needs to be made, and we can't do it later. We have to do it now if it's going to affect the fall season. So, you know, I think it needs to be addressed. So, you know, I'm happy to make a motion for an amendment, but I think it's appropriate to talk about it first.
Director Carter has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick thing. When we talked about all the tagging previously, there were a couple of options that were still left, one being a new app that we're developing along with the licensed vendor that we have now through the Brandt system that would allow people to store in electronic media and whatever they have in order to store, even though they don't have a signal. That's still forthcoming. That's still being discussed. And a couple other options that we have along the same things that we have now in way of checking in. But along with Colonel Ryder, my understanding was the discussion on tagging that we were through with that, with the exception of those options that we're just now talking about in relation to our new license vendor.
I think that was my point, just to bring it up one more time. So I don't think we're done with it from the commission, and I think there's more discussion. I just want to see where we were at the moment and to say that we'd like to discuss that further. So I don't think we're quite ready for an amendment
Well,
yet.
what, if we don't make a change now, then it's going to be fall, or the spring turkey season for 2018 will be the same. It won't take effect till fall of 2018 if we change anything. Is that right? So we're going through another year with no tagging. Am I right or wrong? Correct?
Boy, I'm stepping way out on a limb here.
Well,
What I think happens on this manner and means this particular proclamation can be brought up in front of the commission. Am I correct, Chris? Can you help me here? This proclamation can be brought up at any time and looked at by the commission to amend, correct? I defer to Cheryl. Oh, yes, that's my understanding.
Yes, a proclamation can be opened up at any time. It just has to be on the agenda so the public knows that you're going to talk about it. And it becomes effective 30 days after filing.
all right, but does a delay in passage of this or an amendment miss the hunting guide?
Yeah, I don't know when that goes out, but
It goes out before July.
it does. Yeah, Don says it will affect the hunting guide.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes, sir.
Since we probably are not gonna go to a tag, but if that hunter had a card in his pocket, as soon as he harvested that animal, he had to fill that card out right then. And he had that card in his possession filled out, when he's carrying that animal in his possession back to his truck, driving it back to his house, he gets stopped before he has cell service to check it in. Would that would actually give your officers the ability, if somebody was possibly trying to get game home without checking in, some ability to enforce the law, correct?
Here's the problem with that. You got till the end of that calendar day to check it out, as it's currently written.
But,
The end of the calendar day.
but if he had a card in his pocket, he had to have filled out whether he's got cell service until that point in time that he checks that animal out. Then he's got a record that he's filled out on that card that he can be printed up in our guide, and he cuts it out with a pair of scissors and carries it in his billfold in the meantime.
Then I think you gotta start thinking or looking at language that says immediate check in. That's some of the language y'all need to consider if that's, that way
I
that,
think you're right.
that information on that card has to be immediate. But as it stands right now, you got till the end of the calendar day.
Until I get it clean before anybody else.
True. Ed, did you have a comment?
Is the, Mr. Yost, are you familiar with the Mississippi Harvest Card program?
I am not.
Anybody with wildlife familiar with it, so I won't have to try to go through it long. Okay, Mississippi has the same problem that we have with the electronic tag. They went to a harvest card, much like Chad's talking about, that a hunter's responsible for either downloading it or cutting out of the hunting guide. It is an immediate tag. If he doesn't have cell service, he has to fill it out, so the wildlife officer, and he has to do it immediately, and we lower the time to before you move the animal to electronic check-in. If he moves that animal and he hadn't filled out his harvest card and one of our officers stopped him, it's the same as a tag. If it's not filled out, there's no tag. If he's filled out, then the officer can check it. If he's where he's got cell service, he can be required to call it in or tag the animal electronically. It seems pretty simple. It doesn't cost a thing, and it helps our officers try to keep folks honest. And I think seems logical to me. And if there's not a huge objection, Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of would like to amend the proclamation to or at least discuss that.
Commissioner Cox, would you allow Colonel Taylor to make
Anybody.
comments? He's got a little bit of
That's fine.
research on these variations in different states on these harvest
Hello,
dogs.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kate Taylor. We did go down that road about 6 years ago, and the problem with the hunting guide paperwork, cutting one out of the hunting guide is, they can cut that out, fill out that they've harvested the animal, and as long as they don't get checked on their way home, they can wad it up, throw it in the garbage, and cut another one out. And that kind of defeated that purpose, and we found that it really wasn't, in our opinion, gaining us any ground toward them checking those animals in. I understand what you're saying. If it was non-duplicate, where they couldn't duplicate it, I don't think I can say that word. But if it was something they couldn't duplicate, then I think would be really good for them to have this card they fill out every time before they move the animal. And it's got to be before you transport this animal. And then the officers have something to look at and say, this guy's in violation. The way we did with our harvest tags before.
Well, couldn't you do the same thing with a bolt-on tag?
I think you could, but I think
It'd be a little bit more difficult.
Where
but
we
if you
got jammed
home,
up
you
was
could
on
take
the
it off.
money, and you could take it home, but that tag, once it's validated and you poke holes in it, it's validated. And if it was just tied on but not validated, the ones we had, then it was not, validated, we could charge them.
Well-
And that's the issue we've had, and if it was something that we could do at a low cost and be able to do that, I think that's great, but I think that the cost was prohibitive, and that was the
Well, I
stopping
think
point so far.
the bad guys are gonna be bad guys, but it seems to me that it gives, it at least helps. Because right now, we have, we got nothing. Seems like it's better than nothing.
I agree. I was opposed to it, and we went away from it, but at that point, it was a dollars and cents thing, and if it's a dollar and cents thing 6 years ago, it probably still is, and that's kind of where we were, but I think that there's a possibility. It's hard to tell because the harvest numbers stayed about the same after we went away from that as they are now. They didn't take a quick dive, so we don't know how much we're getting that aren't actually checking their animals in. It's hard to say, but I think it would actually, if you looked at it, help the officers as far as checking them. But an officer doesn't have to have that. If somebody's got a deer, then they can inspect them right away because they've got to have a license to be participating in the hunt. It doesn't take that away from them.
How would moving the check-in time from end of the day to 1 hour? Everybody in state can get cell service within an hour.
I think the problem we have with that is we have a lot of people that say we don't use electronics and we've got to go to a check-in station and we can't get to one, and we're obviously looking for convenience and we want to do that. But there's going to be people that'll say, we don't have service, we don't know how to do it, we don't know how to operate electronics. So that's my 2 cents on this. The log does probably give them something they could write down on, but they could go around that just like they are if they're doing it now.
With Frank's system that we have right now, it seems like, I'm speaking it, I'm looking at you. It looks like I could log on under my hunting ID number. And I could click on it and print a system
Thank you.
Yeah, Michael May, Chief of IT. We can definitely do that, and that's not going to be something that we couldn't do. The technology is there to do that, and if you want us to do it, we definitely can. But the point that we brought up, that can still be printed out multiple times and thrown away and use it again. It could definitely help, but I just want to let you know that is a possibility.
Well, how could it be reprinted multiple times if it's got a number code to, I see what you're saying. They print it and then they make several copies of that. Yeah. There's always a way to
You
get
know,
around
Mr.
the
Chairman, we've
system.
done a lot of talking about the value of data and having good data, and right now we don't have any, and I think this, perhaps even overnight, the agency might come up with an option that might be suitable, but I think we need to do something.
Well, I agree with you, Commissioner Cox, and it is, much of our data is based on our harvest, and much of our assumptions is based on our harvest data, and that's the reason I brought it up, is because I know some of the members of the committee and the commission as well are concerned about this, and I know we've discussed it, but just wanted to revisit it. I know we can't solve it right now. Maybe there's a Brant possibility somewhere there, but I'd like to, just want to discuss it again, see where we are in it, and we'll need to keep working at this somehow. But I know the expense is a problem.
Point out one more thing. The break, all right. Point out one more thing, that we are working in conjunction with other states, with the other different licensed vendors. That there's only a few out there. So we go to the CBMAs and we're talking to the other states, and we're trying to find a collective way to solve these problems. So just to let you know that is happening.
Thanks, Mark. So any further discussion on Proclamation 1704? Commissioner Baker?
We discussed hunting coyotes at night with shotguns only last time. You got anything you want to talk about on that?
Yeah, again, the company statement, the LE does not present any recommended changes for coyote hunting at night. So I think if the commission has discussion, there's some things to consider, such as months of the year, ammunition, types of weapons, and things like that y'all might need to consider.
Yeah, let's talk about ammunition. What would the agency discuss?
It's scattered throughout states, but loose shot seems to be somewhat favorable by most states, and not single solid ammunition slugs, if you will.
You saying like a number 2 to a number 6?
It varies. Some states are number 2 or smaller. Some are number 4 or smaller. I think Oklahoma's is number 6 or smaller.
Okay. Months of the year, of course, we wouldn't want to be anytime during deer season, but if we're wanting to help turkeys and young fawns, there's probably nothing we can do better than to kill more coyotes.
I think you look at some months that's not turkey season or deer season outside of those months.
Right. Okay. What other issues do you see?
Coyotes only. I don't think you go to all predators.
Why not?
You want them shooting bobcats, foxes, horses, and things of that nature. I think you leave it at coyotes. Just saying.
Because that has happened.
It has.
Once. Any other thoughts from the commission on that?
That should take care of it.
You for it? Shotgun on. You for it?
Private lands only, sorry. I wouldn't want to hunt them on WMAs.
We'll have to wait another whole nother year. Is that something we could change after this damn meeting? Thank you, Darren.
Is this something, Richard, is this like the other proclamations, this can be changed? It doesn't have to be changed today. This can be changed later in the year?
Any proclamation can be changed at any time during the year, it's just
Commissioner Baker, you okay if we discuss this further and get more clarification and more specifics about what we're thinking?
I am, but I think that's one of the biggest things we could do to help help the
And-
turkeys and the deer.
I'm sorry, I appreciate that, Commissioner Baker, because if there's a verbal amendment, man, it means I get no sleep tonight. I'm gonna have to pull out a chisel and a stone tablet to change this document, because if you make that change, there's 3 other subsections that it affects. And I'd do it. I promise you I'd do it, but it'd take me a while.
Let's sit down and hash out how we get there
Thank you.
without a lot of trouble from agency and commission.
Any other discussion on proclamation 1704 from the committee?
I've got one question. If you go back to page 3 under trapping, I've got one question
On cushion hole traps, number 5, subsection 5?
on number 8.
Oh, I'm sorry, number 8? Yes.
Okay, it says steel trap should be, steel trap placed inside a hole, cave, or den, or hole wall. Does that mean a hole that the trapper has dug to put the, trap in?
I'm gonna get the technical side to the more technical people.
That would
He
mean
can't.
any hole
Yes.
that they had created, if it's 12 inches or more from the entrance of that hole, if it's a bucket. If it's inside of that thing and it's more than 12 inches.
Well, it says steel trap, excuse me, placed inside a hole, so if the trapper digs a hole down to put set his trap, 12 inches isn't gonna work. So if it's a man-made hole straight down,
I don't think they,
well, it doesn't specify that, I mean, because trapping typically, you'll set your trap maybe this far to the ground and then put sand or something loose on top of it.
well, this is not talking about leg hole, this is talking about conibears, is what this is referring to.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that in here.
Well, it defines, you can put those other traps, the steel jaw traps you're talking about, the way this proclamation reads, they'll be able to be set on top of the ground in a regular dirt hole set.
Okay,
So-
so you're saying that, number 8, where it says steel traps placed inside a hole will not apply to a trapper who had dug a shallow hole this time, put his leg hole trap in.
And it is unlawful to place steel traps in the open except for water sets and traps listed in number 5 above.
And those are the,
And those number 5 above is all those traps listed right there. The laminated cushion hold, offset wide jaw, offset laminate, and wide jaw traps.
So you're saying that they wouldn't get,
They can be set in the open. That's what they're saying, where the cushion hole, for many years, the law provided that only cushion hole could be set in the open, but this would provide that all of those under the best management practices, which are those listed in number 5, would be okay to do that. The lower part is talking about conibear traps that are set in a hole, or cave, den.
and all these 5 and 8 and 9 came from, the AFA, which is American Fish and Wildlife Association. That's their best management practices, and that's the same language that they use, and it coincides with what I understand has been around since 1985. And to be a best management practice, they had to have been researched and tested and approved and all that good stuff. Is that about right, Roger? There's your trap guy.
Thank you, Darren. Any comments from the public? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on proclamation 1704, manner and means of hunting, taking, and trapping. All the committee in favor, say aye. Any opposed? We'd like to recognize Mr. Clarence Dyes and Mr. John Daniels from the Tennessee Fur Harvesters Association.
Commission, members of the TWRA, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you here for a minute. I'm John Daniel. I'm the president of the Tennessee Fur Harvesters Association. I'm also the vice president of the National Trappers Association. I get the opportunity because of my second title to work with DNRs across the country, and I can't express enough how proud I am of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. You guys do an excellent job managing wildlife. You do an excellent job taking care and representing the sportsmen of our state. Our association works tirelessly to help educate the public on proper and sound wildlife management practices throughout the state and the importance of that. And we are now working with you guys at 2 different trapper training camps, one, the new one this past year at Buffalo Ridge Refuge, and long-standing one at the Hiawassee Refuge for the last 12 years. And we're very honored to work with you guys and just look forward to doing more with you guys in the future. And thank you for the opportunity to give our appreciation to you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
I'm Clarence Dyes, Vice President, Tennessee Fur Harvesters, and I just want to say what John did. Y'all don't have any idea how much y'all's service means to me personally and to all the sportsmen of this state. I'd like to congratulate all the commissioners on their new jobs and positions, and kind of belatedly welcome some of our new commissioners. It's a daunting responsibility that y'all have, and the agency too. They have the agency was born the same year I was, and it's accomplished a whole lot more than I have, for sure. But and sometimes it's a hard, thankless job that you have, but every sportsman in this state is much better off for y'all having been here and done this. Thank y'all for the opportunity to be here today. I really enjoyed it. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Dyes. Chairman Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I might just say, take a point of personal privilege, Clarence Dyes and his amazing wife, Laura, who is here with us as well, are dear friends and just great Tennesseans. And just this week, Clarence filed for his fourth World Grand Slam turkey. And so it's been a big week. These two are as fine as they come.
Thank you. And finally, Madam Chairman, that completes the Wildlife Committee. It's almost, it's only 5.
I noticed they turned the temperature up in here. With that, I would say tend to your business as you need to tend to your business for members of the commission. And with that, we're going to move straight into the Fisheries Committee, and I'll recognize Chairman King.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Frank Fisk. And while he's coming to the podium, I would like to say what a great lunch we had. Whoever provided that, it was so delicious. It was wonderful. It's hard to stay awake afterwards.
Chairman King, Commissioners. Not typical that we bring sport fishing proclamations this time of year, but we have one that we need to do in a hurry to get people back on the lake fishing. Chilhowie Reservoir was drained, partially drained anyway, in 2015 for some dam maintenance. And at the request of Brookfield Renewable, the company that operates that waterway, we asked the commission to prevent or close it to fishing to prevent people from finding artifacts in the upper part of the lake, essentially. So the good news is that they feel confident in the work that they've done on the dam, and they're bringing it up to full pool. And when they do that, they'll be doing some testing to decide if they've really accomplished their task. And when we have that information, which we don't have yet, they will tell us that, and they will also tell us that their public access areas are open. And this proclamation is an amendment to the current sport fishing proclamation that would allow the agency to announce the lake as open to fishing for the whole lake. That's our recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions from the Fisheries Committee?
Do we have one quick question about that? Where the lake's been down, is there quite a bit of cover grown up like the other lakes?
Bart Carter's nodding yes. I've not had the pleasure of seeing it. Yep.
Great. I want to go fishing. Yeah. I'll make a motion we approve Proclamation 1708.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of the proclamation 1708? In favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The that proclamation passes. So
Thank you.
I'm done with that.